MSW Media.
The Department of Justice has established a $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund after Trump dropped his lawsuit against the IRS.
A former federal prosecutor has been indicted for sending herself copies of Volume 2 of Jack Smith's final report disguised as cake recipes.
A federal judge has dismissed the charges against Kilmar Abrego Garcia on vindictive and selective prosecution grounds.
And the Justice Department has dropped all remaining charges against the Broadview Six after a grand jury transcript showed gross misconduct. This is Unjustified. Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 70 of Unjustified. It's Sunday, May 24th, 2026. I'm Allison Gill.
And I am Andy McCabe. And Allison, we're going to dive right in because we got some miles to cover here today.
Yeah.
So last week, you will recall, we briefly mentioned a potential forthcoming $1.8 billion slush fund that the DOJ is calling a settlement between Trump, his sons, and the IRS. And we said last week that we'd wait until this week to see what unfolded. And a lot has happened. My God, the country's on fire over this, as it should be.
Yeah.
So it's a story that's been dominating the headlines all week. And of course, since we recorded our last episode, Donald Trump filed a notice to the court that he was dropping his $10 billion lawsuit. Now, he didn't need to ask for permission to do this because the IRS never answered his complaint. And so that allowed him to unilaterally drop the case. He made no mention in his notice of any sort of a settlement.
Yeah. And after that, the judge noticed that. She closed the case, right?
Right.
But she made mention of the fact that there was zero mentions of any settlement, no terms of any settlement in the notice, and that there's no settlement of record. So whatever the Department of Justice would do next would not be a settlement of that case that she just closed. That was her purpose in saying that. And then NBC reported that the Justice Department announced last Monday that it was in fact establishing a $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund after Trump moved to dismiss a $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS over his leaked tax returns. And again, the article here says, NBC says that Trump moved to dismiss his case, but he didn't. Moving requires permission.
That's right.
He just filed notice. He noticed the court. So he didn't move. That didn't happen here. But regardless, they go on to say, Justice Department officials announced that Trump and his co-plaintiffs would drop their IRS lawsuit, as well as their other claims of damages, the one in connection with the 2022 search of Mar-a-Lago, his Florida home, and the one that he was filing for damages in the Russian collusion scandal, all that, the hoax.
Mm-hmm.
And he was dropping all those claims in exchange for creating the fund, which the Justice Department said set up a, quote, systematic process to hear and redress claims of others who suffered weaponization and lawfare.
Yeah, so the 1.776, and if that number sounds familiar, yes, it is. It's been picked for promotional value, I'm sure. $1.776 billion available for the fund was based upon the projected valuation of future claimants' claims, according to the Justice Department.
Sure.
Now, yeah, right. I'd love to see the math. I want to see the work. Show your work on the paper.
Yeah.
Like in school, I want to see how they calculated that.
Yeah, and Public Citizen has filed a Freedom of Information Act request for that very thing.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, Trump was speaking to reporters on Monday afternoon, and he said the fund was meant to reimburse, quote, people that were horribly treated, adding that he wasn't involved in the fund's creation. Yeah, I'm sure he didn't know anything about it. Todd Blanche released the settlement document, but then amended it the following day. The Associated Press reports, on Tuesday, the Internal Revenue Service agreed to drop all pending probes of Trump over whether he's paid his fair share of taxes to settle a lawsuit brought by the president over a leak of his tax returns. Now, that could include, assuming it was ongoing, a long-standing audit into a technique that Trump reportedly used to avoid paying taxes years ago that could have hit him with an estimated $100 million bill if the IRS found wrongdoing.
So he kind of pardoned himself.
Yep, he did. But it doesn't end there, does it?
No. But tax experts, by the way, say that grant of immunity is shocking in the breadth of protection it offers the president and could undermine confidence in the fairness of the tax system. And by the way, nobody's bringing this up, but so I will. When John Gleeson filed his amicus brief against the $10 billion lawsuit, he talked about, hey, if you're thinking of settling this, we need to make sure the DOJ intends to comply with regulatory requirements. And to account for limitations on the relief. And there's certain rules that you have to follow when you settle stuff, including 26 U.S. Code 7217A that makes it unlawful for executive officials to request any officer or employee of the IRS to terminate an audit of any particular taxpayer with respect to the tax liability of such taxpayer. Now, John Gleeson didn't say with respect to Trump and his audits, but I think he put that in there because he knew this was probably going to happen.
I think it would fit. Yep.
Yeah. So here's a quote. This is an unprecedented remedy. That's former IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel, noting that Trump should be treated like every other taxpaying American. Quote, people expect the same tax rules and enforcement framework to apply to everybody. But that's not all. Like you said, the creation of this fund ruffled a lot of feathers in Congress on both sides of the aisle. In fact, Republicans were so mad about this that after a very contentious meeting on the Hill with Todd Blanche, in which at least 25 Senate Republicans yelled at Todd Blanche for setting up the fund without Congress, they all packed up and left town without funding ICE and Customs and Border Protection. So
we're so mad we're going on vacation.
Yeah, they couldn't get because they're funding their reconciliation bill to fund ICE and Customs and Border Protection because Democrats refuse to do so because it falls under the jurisdiction of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So does this weaponization fund. And a lot of people were wanting to put restrictions on it or include laws about this fund in the budget reconciliation bill. And they couldn't. It was like, forget it. And they all just went home.
Oh, pooh. Somebody get my driver and tell him to take me to the airport. I'm ready to go to Cabo. Yeah, I mean, it's just hilarious to me. Like, this is what passes for a fight in Congress. Stomping your feet and shaking your fist as you walk out the door on vacation. Well done, gentlemen.
Now, Ted Cruz, by the way, somebody just sent this to me, apparently said on his podcast, quote, there were fireworks at an epic level. This is about that meeting. And I got to say it's one of the roughest meetings I've seen in my entire time in the Senate. Fiery does not begin to cut it. They were screaming at the acting attorney general. These are Republicans. This was the Republican Senate caucus.
I mean, I'm glad, but wow. What is it? How many years has it been? What has it taken to wake them up? This, apparently.
If only you belong to some sort of legislative body that could pass a law to block the fund. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, well, okay, so this reporting comes from The Independent. President Donald Trump lashed out at his Republican colleagues in the Senate who left the Hill this week without funding the president's signature immigration agenda after widespread opposition to his $1.8 billion slush fund. In a furious Friday Truth Social post, the president hit out at North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis, a soon retiring Republican, who has broken from Trump on various matters, including the newly formed Anti-Weaponization Fund. Referring to Tillis as a weak and ineffective senator, Trump accused Tillis of pushing back against him in retaliation for refusing to endorse him. I don't think that's what it was about, Don. I don't think so. I think it was about the graft and corruption, but that's just my guess.
Our Beans Talk episode on Friday was called Stupid on Stilts, which is what Thom Tillis called this weaponization fund.
Nice.
Quote, the media said this is Trump. The media said how brave he was to take me on, but he wasn't brave. He was just the opposite. He was a quitter. Now he can have all the fun he wants for a few months with some of his rhino friends, screwing the Republican Party. In the end, it will only get bigger and better and stronger than ever before. All right. Lawmakers headed home early ahead of Memorial Day weekend after hitting an impasse over the Justice Department's newly created fund, which would allow people who believe they were unfairly prosecuted to obtain monetary relief from taxpayers.
Many have raised concerns that the fund would give people, such as the January 6 rioters pardoned by Trump, the chance to seek money from the government, despite once violently attacking the Capitol. Yes, that's them. That's the same people who tried to overturn the government. They're now going to be getting that money.
But I was told it was a peaceful protest and that it was caused by 26 FBI agents and liberals. So how would they possibly get money for this?
They were hugging the cops. It was a day of love. No. Okay, so that includes Republicans such as Tillis, who called the fund stupid on stilts, Senator Mitch McConnell, who referred to it as utterly stupid, and Senator Bill Cassidy, who called it a slush fund. Imagine that a fund that is set up to compensate people who assaulted Capitol Police officers and other responding agencies, right? Tillis said on Wednesday. Yeah, right, exactly.
That's exactly it. Stupid on stilts. Now, there have been a few lawsuits filed, including one by former Capitol Police officer, our friend Harry Dunn, and Metropolitan Police Department officer, our friend Danny Hodges. That lawsuit was filed by Brendan Ballou in the District of Columbia. And I will be speaking with Harry Dunn and Brendan today on the breakdown over on the Midas Touch podcast at noon.
Nice.
Now, Crew has also filed a lawsuit to dissolve the fund. Common Cause has filed a lawsuit in the Eastern District of Virginia. Jamie Raskin has introduced legislation to stop it. Multiple people have said they will file claims, including Mark Caputo and Michael Cohen. Jim Acosta says he should be entitled to anti-weaponization money because Donald Trump yanked his press pass during his first term. And then there's this reporting from Ryan Riley at NBC. Quote, progressive podcaster Allison Gill, a former Department of Veterans Affairs employee forced out of her job over her Mueller, She Wrote podcast, said she filed a claim to Blanche this week. She's asking for $8.647 million, a seeming reference to the 8647 Seashells Instagram photo that the Trump administration used to charge former FBI Director James Comey because the Trump administration asserts 8647 is a threat against Trump. Comey joked this week on CNN. He guessed he'd be in line for a payout from the fund, saying, I hope I'll be ahead of those who savagely beat police officers and sacked the Capitol. And we'll keep an eye on all of this going forward. And I just want to say, much like Todd Blanche saying the 1776 is just a valuation of potential claims.
Right.
My $8.647 million is got nothing to do with anything other than that's my calculations on back pay, forward pay, future pay, and lost pension and wages and punitive.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think I need to start scraping together my receipts to slide in there with a claim on my own.
Yeah, are you going to file
I have already been talking to my lawyer about it, so I have not done it yet. But stay tuned. Stay tuned, everyone,
and stay tuned. I will also be filing a lawsuit against this fund coming up this week, and I'll keep you posted on that. So that's a little breaking news, I can tell you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a future in which Todd Blanche gets investigated for public corruption. I think if Todd, particularly if he becomes the Attorney General of the United States, this Todd Blanche, using his position of trust, his public position of trust as a public official, receiving pecuniary gain for doing that. And how can you characterize this as anything other than a bribe to another public official, that being the President of the United States? Maybe not one that goes directly in his pocket, but one that certainly is to his benefit. So I don't know. I'm just theorizing here. I'm just an investigator. That's what I do. So that's my hope for the future.
It's what we call a clue, as
could
they
be
like to say in the business.
Could be.
But, a $1.776 billion bribe makes sense because Todd Blanche could be in deep trouble over our next story. And we're going to talk about that after this break. So stick around. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. Rarely do we have some amazing, great, and incredible news to report here on the Unjustified podcast, but we do today. Great news from CBS. A federal judge, Crenshaw in Tennessee, tossed out an indictment charging Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran man mistakenly deported by the Trump administration last year, with human smuggling. U.S. District Judge Waverly Crenshaw granted Abrego Garcia's effort to dismiss the criminal charges on the ground that the Justice Department's prosecution was vindictive. This is extremely rare to win a vindictive and selective prosecution motion. Crenshaw had already ruled that the Salvadoran man demonstrated the prosecution may be vindictive, which left it up to the government to rebut that presumption. But in his decision, the judge concluded that prosecutors failed to meet that burden. And this is all Todd Blanche's fault.
Yes, ma'am.
It's all his fault, because that presumption of vindictiveness that shifted the burden onto the government to prove they're not being vindictive was because Todd Blanche went on Fox News and said, yeah, we charged him because that Maryland judge, Judge Sines, wouldn't deport him.
Well done, Mr. Blanche. Okay, so the decision is a massive victory for Abrego Garcia, whose immigration case became a flashpoint in President Trump's sweeping immigration crackdown. Abrego Garcia was charged last year with 2 counts of human smuggling, stemming from a November 2022 traffic stop in Tennessee, where he was pulled over by State Highway Patrol and was found to have numerous people in his vehicle. He pleaded not guilty.
The indictment came after Abrego Garcia was removed from the United States in March of 2025 and flown to El Salvador. That was that middle of the night Judge Boasberg emergency hearing about the 2 planes that took off, and he ordered the planes to be turned around. Abrego Garcia was on one of them, but an immigration judge had granted Abrego Garcia a legal status that forbade immigration authorities from deporting him to his home country. And a Trump administration official acknowledged his removal to El Salvador was a mistake. Abrego Garcia filed a civil lawsuit in Maryland challenging his deportation, and a federal judge ordered the Trump administration in April of 2025 to facilitate his return back to the United States. The Department of Homeland Security, however, resisted doing so for months, but then returned him to the U.S. only after they filed these criminal charges.
He has since been intertwined in civil and criminal legal fights and held on separate occasions by federal authorities in Tennessee and immigration officials in Maryland. He's remained out of immigration custody for several months while his case is proceeded. Quote, "The court does not reach its conclusion lightly," Crenshaw wrote. The objective evidence here shows that absent Abrego's successful lawsuit challenging his removal to El Salvador, the government would not have brought this prosecution. The executive branch closed its investigation on the November 2022 traffic stop. Only after Abrego succeeded in vindicating his rights did the executive branch reopen that investigation.
Yeah. And in the criminal case brought in Tennessee, Abrego Garcia and his attorneys argued that he was unfairly targeted by the federal government because of the civil lawsuit that successfully challenged his removal to El Salvador. And during during a nearly 6-hour hearing in February, members of Abrego Garcia's defense team questioned 2 government witnesses on when the Justice Department decided to move to indict him and whether anybody at the White House, Justice Department, or Department of Homeland Security were directly involved in those discussions.
The U.S. attorney, who was then leading the prosecution, Robert McGuire, said he decided to bring charges years after the initial traffic stop because, quote, "the evidence pointed to Abrego Garcia having committed a crime." Such a detailed and specific answer. McGuire also insisted it was his decision to prosecute Abrego Garcia and no one else's, adding that no one instructed him to do so or directed him to seek an indictment. Careful, perjury leaking around the corner there. Look out. Abrego Garcia's legal team, however, showed internal emails from a high-level Justice Department official that suggested that there was significant interest in charging Abrego Garcia after he challenged his deportation, including one that referred to the case as a, quote, top priority. Oh, Mr. McGuire.
Oh, yeah. And that was Mr. Singh, who worked in Todd Blanche's office.
Ah, look at that. Bummer.
In his opinion, the truth will out, right? In his opinion, Crenshaw said he found insufficient evidence of actual vindictiveness, but concluded that the government has failed to rebut the presumption of vindictiveness. Again, this is all Todd Blanche's fault. The record in the case, Crenshaw says, does not explain the government's change in position to remove Abrego and not prosecute him, then prosecute and not remove him, adding there is a retaliatory taint that kicked off the renowned investigation into Abrego Garcia.
Yeah, the judge wrote that objective evidence comes close to showing that, but for Abrego's lawsuit, the Justice Department would not have indicted him. Crenshaw wrote that statements by then Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and the involvement of Akash Singh, an Associate Deputy Attorney General, directly tie Main Justice, that's a quote, directly tie Main Justice to reopening of an investigation into the 2022 traffic stop in Tennessee in response to Abrego Garcia's successful challenge of his deportation. Blanche is now the acting attorney general. Quote, the objective, credible evidence shows that Maine Justice was involved in this investigation before McGuire, Crenshaw said, adding Singh's involvement in the case, quote, touched on everything from the timing of the indictment to the substance of potential charges. And let me just throw in here, Allison, very quickly, remind us what vindictive prosecution requires. It's not just you proving that the government prosecuted you because they don't like you. That's not enough. You have to prove that the government prosecuted you to force you to do something else that the government wanted you to do, right? So it's like if the government charges you with narcotics trafficking and you're like, I didn't do that, I'm going to go to trial. Then they come back and charge you with another narcotics trafficking and wire fraud and like add 20 more charges on top of you, just like using the criminal justice system to like break you, to make you stop resisting, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened here.
Oh, it's 100%. Totally what happened here. But I think it's interesting that the emails back and forth didn't rise to vindictive prosecution. But like I said, because Todd Blanche said that stuff on Fox News and there was a presumption of vindictiveness, the burden shifted from Abrego Garcia having to prove it was vindictive to the government having to prove it was not. And they failed. That is why these charges are being dismissed. And it's so rare, again, like I said, to get one of these rulings. Now, I spoke with Mr. Abrego's attorney. His name is Sean Hecker, and he submitted this statement to me. He said, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a victim of a politicized, vindictive White House and its lawyers at what used to be an independent Justice Department. We are so pleased that he is a free man, justifiably so. As this administration continually chips away at our democracy, we remain grateful for an independent judiciary that will dispassionately apply binding precedent to the facts. So Todd Blanche could, he might have needed to send over a $1.776 billion gift to Donald Trump after he got this case thrown out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, it is what it is. Todd Blanche is engaged in the highest, most visible act of trying out for a job in the history of this country. And he's going to do anything humanly possible to get himself to get rid of the acting and become the permanent attorney general. And the irony of all this is that the latest step, which we talked about the first part of the show, the slush fund, might be the thing that actually kills the deal for him, because he still has to get approved by the Senate. He's got to get confirmed if he's going to be the attorney general. And this thing may have made him unconfirmable.
That's a very good point.
How do you vote for this guy if you're screaming at him in a hearing and stomping out of the hill to go on vacation because he made you so mad? I don't feel like that's the best preparation for getting those senators to confirm you, but we'll see. We'll see how.
Yeah, they tend to fall in line. But now that you've got Tillis, Cassidy, who lost his primary after Trump went against him, and then you've got folks like Collins and Marquette. Cassidy actually bucked his vote on a war powers resolution and voted with the Democrats. So after 8 tries, they finally got a war powers resolution through. And then when it went to the House, they couldn't get the votes to stop it. So they canceled the vote.
We're closed. No soup for you. There's no more soup left today. Go home. Everybody go home.
Jim McGovern was like, what's going on? Why are we not having this vote? And he's like, you'll have to submit a parliamentary procedure. He's like, just tell me why we aren't having to click, gavel, gavel, gavel. Everybody leave. We're going home for vacation. So they weren't able to vote on a war powers resolution. They weren't in the Senate able to vote to fund ICE and Customs and Border Protection with their budget reconciliation bill. So yeah, we'll see what happens. While I think Republicans do fall in line a lot, there's at least a couple of senators that are now just going rogue, because that's what happens. You grow a spine when you don't have to run for office.
When you've been
again.
taken out, when you've been
Trump.
Right, when you got the Joe Pesci treatment in the basement one day by Donald Trump, which is happening like all over the place. Yeah, that doesn't make friends, Mr. President. That doesn't secure allies whose votes you need on stuff. So yeah, it's incredible. It's kind of like, in a weird way, it's kind of the domestic version of, provoking a pointless war with Iran for the sole purpose of convincing them that they can now hold the entire world hostage with the with the Straits of Hormuz. But I digress. I don't want to get into it.
Did you see that the plan was actually to put in Ahmadinejad? Did you see that story from the New York Times? I'm like, my God, what? It was Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump, but then they accidentally injured him, and he's like, I'm out. I'm not part of your plan anymore. And so that's when the Khomeini's son took over the regime. And they were like, oops, and the strait is closed and we can't open it. Darn.
Yeah.
It's just, oh my God, just incompetence from top to bottom.
Unbelievable.
Ahmadinejad.
You know what? I'm sorry. It's totally believable.
It is.
It's been believable all along. Yeah.
You're right. This next story that we're going to cover, though, is actually kind of unbelievable. I can't believe this happened, but we'll talk about that right after this quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. All right. This next one comes from Politico. I don't know what else to say about it. Let's just dive in.
Wow. Just wow.
This one, I gotta be honest. This one struck me out of the blue. As you know, I am far away this week. I'm on the other side of the world, and don't tell anyone. I'm in Sydney, Australia right now, which is super cool. But I read this. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Anyway, a former Justice Department prosecutor has been charged with sending herself copies of an unreleased volume of, you got it, Special Counsel Jack Smith's report on his investigation into President Donald Trump. Her name is Carmen Leinberger. Am I getting that right, Allison, or Lindberger?
I haven't heard her name pronounced, so I assume it's Leinberger.
Okay, Leinberger, it is, 62 years old, entered a not guilty plea to 4 charges related to stealing and concealing government records in federal court in West Palm Beach, Florida on Wednesday. She was released on her own recognizance, court records show.
So get this. The indictment says Leinberger, who was the managing assistant U.S. attorney in Fort Pierce, Florida, received a copy of the restricted Smith report volume by email last year and then sent it and other internal DOJ messages to her personal Hotmail and Gmail accounts. U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon has barred public release of that volume. Remember, you can't send it outside of the Department of Justice.
That's right.
Which discusses his investigation, Jack Smith's investigation, into the presence of classified documents. More than just the presence of classified documents, the retention and the obstruction of
the mishandling, all that. All those espionage acts, yes.
Right, 42 counts, man. Now, an attorney for Leinberger, Tama Kudman, did not respond to requests for comment.
The indictment returned Tuesday says Leinberger sought to cover her tracks by using the file names, quote, chocolate_cake_recipe.pdf and bunt_cake_recipe.pdf for the internal government records she moved to her personal accounts. Every spy knows if you put cake in the file name, no one will ever know what's in there. Okay. However, the charges and a Justice Department press release don't make any claims about why Leinberger moved the documents to her private emails. The indictment also doesn't provide details of what, besides the report, was in the emails and documents she moved to personal accounts.
Interesting. You got to prove intent, right? We'll see what happens.
You do.
There.
Maybe she comes back and says, you know what? The DOJ systems are so bad. I just sent them to my personal Hotmail account, which is much better.
Much more secure.
Get my work done. Could happen.
Boy, it's not classified.
Nope.
Anyway, Leinberger faces 1 felony count of obstruction of justice, for calling it cake. 1 felony count of concealing government records, calling it bunt cake, and 2 misdemeanor counts of stealing government property valued at under $1,000. The maximum sentence, if convicted on all charges, is 25 years in prison. Although federal defendants typically receive significantly shorter terms under federal sentencing guidelines, especially first-time offenders with no criminal history. The case is being handled by prosecutors from the Northern District of Florida, likely because Leinberger's ties to people in the U.S. Attorney's Office for Southern Florida could create a conflict of interest.
Because they've all had her bunt cake. So, they can't... You can't sit in judgment of someone whose cake you've eaten.
There's a hole in this cake.
Okay. Kash Patel, of course, any absurd story these days also includes that gentleman. Kash Patel posted on Twitter about it saying, quote, "This afternoon, a former managing assistant U.S. attorney who supported Jack Smith's politicized investigation of President Trump has been charged with stealing the confidential investigation documents. Carmen Lineberger allegedly emailed the confidential material to her own personal email, disguising them as dessert recipes to conceal them from record searches. Lineberger is charged with 4 felony counts in the indictment. This FBI will not hesitate to bring to account those who violated the trust of the American public in an investigation that should have never been brought to begin with." Close quote.
It's interesting. I wonder if Kash Patel has any interest in what's in Volume 2 of that report, given that he's in Volume 2 of Jack Smith's final report. Back in January of 2025, senators demanded information from Volume 2 when they were considering the nomination of Kash Patel as FBI director. In a letter to the DOJ, they demanded Mr. Patel's grand jury testimony as part of the department's investigation of Trump and other defendants regarding the president's unlawful retention of classified documents, and any and all sections of Volume 2 of the final report of the special counsel's investigations and prosecutions submitted on January 7th, 2025 by special counsel Jack Smith to the Attorney General that refer to or pertain to Mr. Patel's testimony or actions.
Special counsel Jack Smith's team issued subpoenas to Verizon Communications for Patel's communications at the time when they were investigating whether President Donald Trump had interfered with the 2020 election and had hidden classified documents at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. During the dispute over presidential records, Patel was designated by Trump to be his representative to NARA, that's the National Archives and Records Administration. He publicly asserted that Trump had issued orders declassifying the materials at Mar-a-Lago, a claim he repeated during his 2022 grand jury testimony in the documents case, but a claim that was never, ever proven or substantiated by a single shred of evidence. I'm adding that to the paragraph here, but
claim, or you could call it a lie.
Yeah. A lie based on mistruths is, that's what a lie is.
Yeah, and that defense was never used. We talked about that when we saw the defenses that were put forth by Trump and Nauta and De Oliveira. Like they weren't trying to say that he declassified these things.
That was even too much for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but not for Patel, who now has indicted somebody who was a potential leak of these documents. But I will say this, I'm very pleased that there are copies out there besides like the one that is, in a burn bag up in Kash Patel's office and the one that Judge Cannon has. So we're still following the story too about the Knight Institute at Columbia University's request to release Volume 2 of the report now that the charges have been dismissed against Nauta and De Oliveira, that was the reason, the justification that Eileen Cannon refused to allow the report to be released.
Right.
But anyway, I think it'd be interesting to see how this case plays out. We'll definitely follow it because I think it's fascinating. Like you said, it just bolt from the blue. Cake recipe lady stealing Jack Smith's Volume 2.
Something
Send it to us.
Something like this happens. You're like, oh my God, how close were we? Were we close? Could we have been the next email recipients? I get so many crazy emails from people. I would gladly taken one from Carol Lineberger. Seems like a nice person.
I went back through all my emails and signals to see if I'd gotten any bundt cake or chocolate cake recipes, and I have not. So
that's so disappointing.
I know.
Oh.
We were that close. We want that report. Now, in a related story from Politico, a federal judge has ordered aides to Trump to continue to observe the requirements of the Presidential Records Act, despite a Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel opinion that found the law unconstitutional and how it unconstitutionally intrudes on presidential power. Okay. In a ruling Wednesday, U.S. District Judge John Bates concluded the 1978 statute is likely constitutional and granted a preliminary injunction that essentially nullifies the opinion issued last month by the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel. So that's good
news.
Quote,
yes, the original public meaning of the text of the Constitution, canons of interpretation, Supreme Court precedent, general principles of property law, and almost 50 years of practice confirm that Congress has the enumerated power to regulate presidential records under the Constitution's property clause, Bates wrote. He covered the whole horizon there of possible buttresses to this statute. Bates, a George W. Bush appointee, faulted the OLC opinion for relying on a, quote, stark misreading of the Supreme Court precedent. That is nerdy lawyer speak for you effed up, boys. That is a
really
pretty
bad.
Yes. When a federal judge accuses your interpretation as a stark misreading. He also rejected the Justice Department's arguments that the law is unconstitutional because presidential papers were considered personal property of the president until the 1970s.
Yeah, until the law that's totally constitutional.
The law came along and changed that. Oh, boy.
But before that, it wasn't the law. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
You also used to be able to kill someone for stealing your horse. Yeah. That's not allowed anymore either. I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys. Things change. It just, over time, we grow, we learn as human beings. We try to get a little bit better and things change. Anyways.
My goodness.
He also noted that the Trump administration observed the law without objection during his first term. Well,
yeah, why would you follow it for 4 years if it were so unconstitutional?
Different.
Right.
Yeah.
My goodness. All right, everybody. We have a pretty significant hit me in the head with a bat segment this week. It harkens back to, do you remember when Comey was indicted the first time and they were going through grand jury transcripts as part of a vindictive and selective prosecution claim? And found that apparently Lindsay Halligan, who'd never appeared before a grand jury, got a no true bill on 3 counts, but then just erased the first one and then signed it like she got a true bill on the second 2 and didn't tell anybody. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like that on steroids. What happened in this case. And we're going to talk about it after this break. Stick around. We'll be right back. Everybody, welcome back. It's time for a little hit me in the head with a bat.
Hit me in the head with a bat. Hit me in the head with a bat. Hit me in the head with a bat. Hit me in the head with a bat.
Which is our segment going over the presumption of regularity. This one's a doozy, Andy. It's from CBS. Federal prosecutors in Chicago have dismissed all remaining charges against the 4 remaining members of the so-called Broadview Six, a group of protesters who were arrested outside a U.S. ICE facility in Broadview, Chicago last fall. Defense attorneys and prosecutors were forced to drop the case because of significant errors in the grand jury process.
Whoops.
Yep.
U.S. Attorney Andrew Boutros said during a Thursday afternoon hearing that the decision to dismiss charges was due to improper handling of the grand jury proceedings by the lead prosecutor in the case. A rare federal trial for misdemeanor charges that had been scheduled to begin next week was canceled after